Welcome to this podcast with myself, Roseanne Freak-Poli, and J.R. Baker.
Hi, Roseanne. Great to be here.
This is our second podcast, as we recently recorded an episode of a conversation about for the Mental Health Professionals Network, or MHPN. During that podcast, we discussed our opinions on social isolation, social support, and loneliness. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing JR about his work. JR, you have told me about what you do, but it wasn't until I saw it last month when I was in Queensland that I understood. It's really exciting what you're doing and how progressed you are with enacting change. So my first question is really about your inspiration. And I feel like in a prior conversation, you mentioned your mum, some of the work she did.
Yeah.
And where that came from.
Yeah, definitely mum and dad. I shouldn't shortchange him. So I suppose mum is a teacher and also an artist. And so a lot of her stuff was teaching through art and through sort of secondary pathways. So she would teach math through art or cooking, or she would, teach about space through different paintings and using protractors and whatever else. So she would try to actually leverage people's creative expression and their skills to provide education across areas they might not engage with in the same way. So it's easier to do fractions, making cookies possibly, than it is to do it on pen and paper and just do it that way. So she was always a creative teacher. And then Dad, he was, he's a dentist his whole life, but a nice dentist, not the type that tortures you. So he spent a lot of his time either working at prisons, giving people smiles, or homeless shelters, or working with, lots of different people in different settings in different places around the world, but always to try to give people an extra leg up through a smile, I suppose, and pain relief and all the rest of it. But he was all about restoring people's confidence through the most simple starting point, which is just that grin to people. So, both lovely, caring people, both clever people. And so I think they influenced me in their own respective ways to take an educational approach, abstract sort of conceptualization with everything, indirect learning and educational opportunities and contribution to others.
So it sounds like they're both really in tune with their creativity, that they've really invested this want of giving back in you.
Yep.
And those two things is almost what I see, or I can see how that has formed what you do now.
Yeah, so Mum did formal teaching stuff, but she probably put more effort into stuff at Boys and Girls Clubs and the after schools programs and things like that, trying to give people confidence in new skill sets and sort of supplement where the education system, she wasn't always sure was actually hitting the mark. One of her most common comments, unfortunately, was that things were being stripped out of education. And so people were taught simple ways of doing things, but actually lacked the sort of fundamental building blocks to have that be transferable sort of knowledge. So I think she worked super hard, particularly in that teaching side of things, to make things easy to, accessible, so to speak, like easy to actually learn and grasp and use in different sort of ways. Whereas a lot of education doesn't seem to have gone that way. And she's definitely not a digital education kind of person, very face-to-face person, and so was Dad. So I suppose both of them constantly reinforce the idea of human connectivity, connection, and building helpful things with other people and believing in people and not quitting on people. So,
Which is what you're doing now, but in adults.
Yes.
Through PCCS. So maybe explain what PCCS stands for and what you're doing.
Yes, PCCS is a long, real name, Primary and Community Care Services Limited, which is way too long, so we just shortened it. And really, we're all about better quality of life. That's the shortest version of it. So Oh, it can be anything. So people who are isolated, lonely, sort of disparities in sort of quality of life for social determinants of health-based issues. So some of our services are aimed at people who are older but might not have supports and who might be exiting hospital, for example, make sure they get home and get their things unpacked and have medicine and people to help out and sort of add that sort of structural, instrumental social support back into their lives. Other people, it might just be working at developing new skills and capabilities of uncovering them, like an archaeologist. So really giving people a chance to have a go. And build confidence. There's that until people have a go, you can't really build confidence, and that self-belief sort of lags. So, and then until you have something to go forward with that matters to you with that confidence, then life can become quite stagnant. So it's always moving towards a better tomorrow sort of approach, which is a tricky thing to try to do through programs and a never-ending battle towards intentional, progressive, values-based sort of practice, but not always the simplest thing, even though they're simple concepts.
Yeah, simple concepts, but really hard to actually do because every person is very different. And I think that that's where this individualized approach. Before we move on, I actually want to just allude to the fact that we did discuss a little bit of this in our past podcast, as in the reasons why we probably need this assistance or this help, because the way that society functions is that we're currently become sort of units. We're not in large family networks anymore. And so what you're talking about there is this instrumental support. So these are practical support that may have or be currently for some people provided by family members or friends and relatives that are living close to you. That seems to be less now. People move away. We're a very transient society. And the other thing is instilling confidence. Having people around you to instill that in you. It seems like we need people, more people contact that we're getting. I guess that's what you're giving. Yeah.
And it's funny, the helping other people doesn't always get rewarded. We've made a punitive system where we don't have a lot of forgiveness, I suppose, for people who have a go. So I was doing a webinar the other week, and a bunch of grassroots community organizations, they were commenting that they need insurance and workers screening and all sorts of things they couldn't really afford just to try to help and contribute. And the thing that irritated me the most, I suppose, in recent past was one of my colleagues was dropping off a neighbor who had had a fall and had just lost her husband, and it was a horrible time for her. He was driving her to do a physio to look after her injury, and had to stop in a no stopping zone for 20 seconds just to help her out of the car and get her to the physio. And he got pinged with a ticket. And he did try to appeal it and provide information about why he was stopping. There was no other cars there. It was in a cul-de-sac. It was I know the spot exactly, and it was a harmless sort of thing. And they wrote back pretty unforgivingly, too bad, cup the fine. And I thought, all right, well, if it was their mother, their cousin, their sister, their brother, they would have wanted the person to do that. There's no way they would have wanted an injured person to walk further in a time of grief. But there's this dehumanizing, insensitive, the system says that's how it is, follow the rules, get your paperwork. And so something inhuman has happened where we've created this legislative, risk-based system, which has kind of lost the fundamental truth of, the importance of care contribution and caring and all the rest of it. It's fear and not beneficence, contribution, growth, joy. I don't know. It's dangerous. Yeah.
It is dangerous in a way because, like we discussed in the last podcast a little bit about how we need social interaction for our well-being and also our long-term health benefits. So it is actually quite dangerous, not having people around you. So I guess that's one aspect is this connecting people with the supports they need in their community or in their home. Another aspect is you've got safe spaces. So maybe describe what a safe space is.
Well, I have a mixed feeling about the different variations of safe spaces. My favorite safe space, ironically, is just a simple cafe we opened up because it's naturally safe feeling because it's just covered in plants. It does have a social prescribing link worker available some of the time, so people can actually access connections effectively to resources and opportunities and community around them. So it's pretty much kind of like not a life coach, but really just a life navigator of sorts who can help connect people with things they need. But really, it's a nice, safe environment. Now we run, and I say that because it's, green stuff, happy, smiling people just having gentle conversations, no aggression, no nastiness, just nice people, nice things, nice times. We do run more formalized safe spaces as well, similar cafe vibe, but there's something that changes when you add even a peer support, a clinical lens that shifts it from looking for opportunities and providing kind of general human connection and support to providing safety. Like, again, it's a risk management type of approach where you try to create a environment to stop bad things from happening. But we've been trying to flip that on its head a bit and look at opportunities again to help people move forward towards things with direction, to longer term supports and connections and those sorts of things. So, but it's always tricky because anybody who knows the horrible sort of Maslow's hierarchy sort of approach to life, everyone starts with the really essential bottom tier stuff, food, shelter, all that sort of stuff, safety. But sometimes the emotional, vision related, self-actualization stuff at the top end is what actually motivates and gets people moving. And so it's sort of remiss to just focus on the immediate sort of things, which is what our systems are good at, respond to the immediate crisis. But really, if you want to fix things, you have to look at the long-term sort of vision. And I don't think, in general, westernized approaches have been very good at thinking long-term. We have, our election cycles, our short-term risk mitigation, our get people in and out of a service sort of approach, or quick contacts, but that doesn't really address long-term social well-being and quality of life across all peoples.
Yeah, so there's a couple of aspects there that I want to touch on. So first of all, coming back to the safe spaces that we're talking about, I feel like I might want to give having gone there, because I think it's really different. You're there, you're doing it, you're in it. And I didn't quite understand what it was until I got there. And I've visited there's two locations that I visited. So the first one had some board games and tables and colouring and books, some things around the place, a bit like a living room. And then we walked down the side past a kitchen and at the back to where there's this emerging a garden, an edible garden mainly, and a place at the back that people can sit and eat. I think that till you really go and you see what you've grown, and I'm talking about the fully usable kitchen that you can use to teach people how to cook, the garden that people are growing, physically growing and helping with that, and as well as this safe space at the front that can be used for other activities such as crafts, music. It's just a place that these activities could be run in, that you're providing an opportunity for people to have another sort of home away from home. And I don't know how else to describe it, as it's just this warm sort of home feeling when you go there. Yeah. But then you might want to just touch on, why you've set it up that way and who's sort of accessing these spaces, as in the skillness.
Yeah. Well, that particular space you mentioned, I saw that as a very dark and kind of odd Thai restaurant that was very full with stuff and didn't seem to have a lot of utility, and definitely did try to take it towards a unusual, now I'm talking design, but that's all right, towards more of a Cape Cod sort of light color scheme, ocean, relaxed sort of flowing home vibe, but still retaining elements like a commercial kitchen, walk-in fridge, and then taking a parking lot and making effectively a little micro-urban farm. And why? Mostly because Well, it's a good place to learn a lot of different stuff, and there's no better place to learn how to cook than in a commercial kitchen with actual chefs. And I've seen lots of programs that do basic cooking skills and things like that. I think those are easy things to embed in cooking more complex dishes. So the approach we've taken is to only try to offer stuff that any of us would pay top dollar for, which is an unusual approach, but I think people grasp the concept of a real value in terms of dollar value. So if you know, our time is our most valuable thing. So if you're going to go to a cooking class, is it one you'd spend $10 to go to and just to get some ingredients, or is this something you'd want to spend time with a top chef and spend hundreds of dollars to learn how to cook amazing dishes? So we went the latter approach to try to actually always judge things in terms of commercial appeal to people. But of course, we're not charging for the things. We're lucky to have sort of generous funders. Money comes from various places like the Department of Health Commonwealth and funders like Gold Coast Primary Health Network in that case. And then other partners like Gold Coast Hospital and Health Services. So we're lucky to have good partners who want to try to do things differently, and who are happy to take the greater risks, I suppose, in the sense of it's way easier to run a group where you, I don't want to use the wrong language, but you just create a space for people to go to. That's easy. It's different to try to create a space and the opportunities to actually grow in leaps and bounds, and to try to fast track things that take years, because, you know, commercial cookery takes quite a long time. You do a full course, various choices. I mean, you can do your Cert 4, you can go to Le Cordon Bleu or whatever else you want, and then you spend a lot of years in the kitchen. But trying to fast track that and still give people that opportunity to create restaurant quality dishes that they can share with friends and family, and to grow the actual foods that go into those dishes, and to have that ability to actually, you know, sustain their own lifestyle with their own food sources. I mean, that's real food sustainability, is being able to grow and grow food and feed yourself, and to cook it, and to cook it to the standard that you would expect far exceeds what you can get on Uber Eats, you know. So that's where the focus has been a bit more extreme than I think you'll find a lot of places, in terms of it being practical, professional, you know, vocational, real education. So that's why we registered all those things under the Skillness Institute as a registered training organization. And slowly are putting things on scope tiny bit by tiny bit, just to try to recognize some of the skill sets people do, but not to run it as a training organization in its own right, because it's about enjoying stuff. It's about loving cooking a delicious dish and sharing it with other people, or growing stuff as a community, because it's way easier to look for caterpillars and pests and things, and to look after the soil as a group of people than as individuals.
When you are talking about the cooking, it's all culinary skills, I would actually call it. It's beyond just basic cooking. It's the way I think about it is it's likened to Jamie Oliver's 15 project, but it's not aimed at people that are younger. It's aimed at people that are older, that need a little bit more of a confidence boost in life. Maybe they don't go on to do cooking, but they are learning that they can learn. And that's what's really important. They're enacting change in themselves to know that they can learn new things.
Interesting you brought that reference, because not this term. This term we have a head chef out of Sydney teaching a lot of the classes, but the previous set of classes were actually run by a chef who did work in the 15 restaurant in Melbourne, Glenn Flood, who did work with Jamie on that project, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the current chef, he's a gun. His flavors are exceptional, and I think if, you know, he's contributing to other people's skills development, I suppose, which is great, which I love, which is good for all of us. But he's got the palate of a three-headed chef any day. So it's a real gift to be able to get really, really capable people. He's only got one hat, I think, but he could have three, I'm sure. It's an absolute gift. And so I suppose we always need more people like that anyways, because in the ideal we'd be running constant sort of self-contained modules to give people extensive professional vocational level skills, but in fun, digestible ways. So in a sense, we kind of want to challenge some of the current educational pathways, which are built around function and form. Again, I'm not trying to attack every system on earth, but a lot of the way education is progressed now is tick box in a sense, because you have a required set of standards to hit and required ways to demonstrate you hit the standards. And that doesn't actually always convey the love of what you're doing in the sort of learning process for that. A lot of it is just demonstrate you've done this, demonstrate you've done that, show that you can, prepare this thing 6 different ways, or that you can slice, dice, chop, chiffonade, whatever else. And it's like, okay, I mean, you can do that, but you can do that while creating magnificent food masterpieces. You don't have to just deliver it a certain way to tick boxes in a linear way, but it takes bravery to do it without that sort of linear, clear, straightforward pathway. And so it's a journey, and that's why we haven't rushed everything and putting it through all the accreditations for everything else. We focus more on the experience, the journey, the food product, than pushing it right into the educational frame. But the hope is to actually bring education back to the joy of creation and the fun and the passion and the skills that come with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a variety of opportunities through the BCCS. So the cooking is one.
Yep.
Then the gardening, which we've mentioned as well, is another one.
Yep.
And then the third one was the video documentary filmmaking that you were doing.
So that's great. That's using industry standard equipment. And similarly, we have a photography that also uses the fancy DSLR cameras and all the rest of it. Art, so mostly visual arts around painting and things like that. And then there's some of the things we teach are more simple, transferable to your life sort of skills. So yoga and force therapy, they're more about connection to body and land and sort of grounding and sort of emotional self-regulation abilities by being present but transferable. You can go out for a walk with a bunch of people anywhere and take the time to listen to the trees and actually feel the earth under your feet. So there's a separate set of things, which is less about obvious direct vocational transference, but more about still that personal quality of life and that chance to be present and be connected.
All these things that you're talking about, there's evidence behind the fact that if we are mindful, if we engage with the environment, you will have a better quality of life, better well-being. So what you're doing is enacting, and that's where I said at the start of the podcast, I was saying it's actually just amazing how much you're actually doing, because I think there's theories and there's research, but to actually do it on the ground with people that need it is a different thing, and that's where you're filling the gap. And I think that's one of the thoughts I just really want to instill. But the other thing I wanted to come back to is through all of these courses, it's not necessarily about that you're creating chefs or creating gardeners. They're using this as an opportunity to relearn how to learn, to have contact with people, to get out of the houses. You've had really great flow-on effects from people doing your courses as well. So that I think that this is a good opportunity just to...
Yeah, so it's, not everyone who can cook a restaurant quality sort of dish has to go and work in a restaurant. Not to say that some people don't want to do that, some do, but some people are happy just to take the dishes home and share it with friends or family. So the first and simplest flow-on effect is when people love something, they tend to share it with other people. So passions don't tend to exist in solitude. When you care about something, whether you're creating pieces of artwork or magical dishes, you tend to want to share those things and for other people to receive the joy and the benefit of them. So it naturally fosters the desire to share things through mutual love and interest. In terms of, non-direct, indirect sort of lateral thinking sort of outcomes, there's the actual things people take away, the direct thing, which is 60, 70, 80% of people who do horticulture might want to grow stuff in their house, which is great. And people cooking, that's a guaranteed sort of thing. But the fact that people will pick to cook where they might have gotten takeaway or whatever else, it's good for their long-term sort of outlook we'll go with. A lot of the food preservatives and all the other stuff, and that sort of quick and easy food isn't always a good choice. So the fact that they can create stuff, the clean, healthy stuff, is good. But then a lot of people do just take the chance to leverage the confidence and social opportunities, really, because socialization, people focus on loneliness a fair bit, but I don't think loneliness is always quite the right sort of place to look. A loss of social confidence in your competence is a kind of more complicated way to look at it, but it tends to be one of the themes that comes up a lot, where whether you've had a workplace injury and been disconnected from work for years, or whether you've lived with complex psychotic illness for a long period of time, whatever it might be, that chance to socially engage, to be confident in communicating with others, to feel like you have something to contribute, to be listened to and to be responded to, and to sit in that collaborative, collective environment, that's what tends to get lost. And then that creates a different type of disconnection, and we don't always label it the right way, but effectively this sort of approach gives people an opportunity to meet over a passion that doesn't require them to overthink their social and communication contributions, in a sense. So it's easy to talk about, I love that color of paint that you've just mixed there, because it doesn't require a lot other than genuine, gentle appreciation, or, wow, those plants really grew. And those sort of micro interactions in the aggregate, I think, create that confidence in that communication and self-efficacy space around just interpersonal interactions. And then the other sort of competency is already there. It's just people might forget them. So it's easy once you can communicate your skills to then go forward. And so a lot of people go for jobs that have nothing to do with the things we teach, or go volunteer and contribute in other ways, or even the most obvious and common things, which I think get forgotten a lot. I just remember one of the cooking students, she was amazed at all the different types of mustards, but the implication for that wasn't that she went to become a commercial chef, but for the first time in her life she was cooking for her kids, and they liked mustard, it turned out, so it all worked out pretty well. Otherwise it would have been a bit more complicated, but it was just interesting to see, and I met one of her sons, and he was a lot older than I expected. So you can figure 15 years of his life, he didn't probably have home-cooked food at all. And so it just makes you kind of think, wow, all right, what are people actually eating, and what are the opportunities that have been lost? But she never had the confidence to even consider even what groceries to buy or how to prepare food in any sense. So there's, on the one sense, people have never even had the opportunity, which a lot of us take for granted, that we can just put together a sandwich or pasta thing real quick. But I can tell you a lot of people can't even cook pasta. I was amazed, but boiling water and putting dried pasta in is not a skill that every Australian has, because I remember talking to once upon a time, a long time ago, on Men's Line, some people who post their relationship failures hadn't eaten in days because they couldn't cook the simplest of meals, but they could operate really complex, fancy machinery and equipment. And so, yeah, I think we all take for granted different aspects of our capabilities and competence, but once you get a little bit of a chance of skills and a chance to realize that you can contribute and have interesting things to offer, it makes it all easier. And I went way off track with that answer. But
oh, no, I think that you answered it, because what I was interested in are these examples of flow-on effects. I think that it's really important for people to understand that it's not just going to the course, it's the fact that people have things to offer than other people in their life, and it can be something, just having changed in the way people communicate at home or with their family about the passion about talking about something. It can make a huge difference, and then all you need is one or two good conversations, and then it can change relationships, and that improves over time as well. So.
And that's one of the things that most research studies can't really pick up on, because we try to measure everything with simple, consistent tools. We want to take a single approach and ask people, all people the same question and expect that it's going to apply to their individual circumstances. And unless that question is, what is magnificently different now, and how does that affect the people around you, and you're happy to go and delve through every individual answer and look for common thematics, sort of groupings, you're probably not going to get the answer from a single tool or metric. But yeah, one of the things I'm always amazed at is how people, their biggest joy after these things isn't anything they've learned for themselves, it's then sharing that with someone else, and seeing, a kid who's feeling a bit less depressed afterwards, or that they actually think they are a better parent afterwards because they've shared those things and how to paint, or even just how to organize their day or deal with their budgeting and finances, because we do also do education and stuff that's less fun, like budgeting. But again, it's a skill that I think a lot of the world doesn't really have, or even understanding debt. It's interesting.
And I think that's the reason why you've taken the next step, which is offering the opportunity for people who are doing the courses to take some plants to the cafe that we're talking about, Grounded Cafe, and meeting their loved ones there to give them something.
Yeah, no, it's and strangers too, which is amazing. So it's lovely to see people grow stuff or make stuff, and then to see that go into the real world, because that's where it belongs, and to see family, friends, loved ones, or strangers get plants or new recipes or skills to transfer those things to other people. Completely the opposite of a good commercial system, but then completely utilizing the real commercial system. So most people wouldn't want to give away their recipe or give away free produce and things like that. But it's nice to actually see people give, a basil plant, something simple and humble, but which can then provide flavor and joy for quite some period of time. And the humble basil plant, I still think the most interesting thing was one gentleman, this lovely guy who got a basil plant, he looked at it and he was really emotional, and because his wife was overseas and they had a lot of herbs at home. And he said every morning he would look at it and it'd be the most beautiful basil plant because it reminded him of his wife until he could see her again. They have been reunited. That's the good ending to the story. But the plant did help for some period of time, and I think he got to eat it too, which is a plus. So, and the other thing about plants, just because you brought it up, I love is if you give someone a plant, a lot of people don't want to kill it. So especially when it's an edible thing, they're more likely to want to actually use it and keep it alive. It feels wrong to throw away a thriving, beautiful, green, vibrant, aromatic thing into a bin. So at worst, they'll give it to somebody else, and at best, they'll nurture it, grow it, love it, and use it, which is this gentle, indirect reminder that you can actually cook your own food and actually eat local, natural, which, if you look at the trickle-down effects, which I definitely have no evidence for, but buying local, cooking local, and eating local in the longer term, we've made it very fancy now, the provenance of food. This food was grown 6 kilometers away. I mean, that was life for most of human history and most of natural history. People ate where they lived. This whole exotic thing we did for the last 50 or 80 years of flying avocados from Mexico and all sorts of crazy things, and Madagascar vanilla might be the best, but it's very lavish, and there's plenty of great produce that you can grow locally or buy locally, and so the secondary impacts are there too.
And of course, all the evidence around the fact that being around green is good for us, our health, whether it's inside or outside, more plants inside, air quality as well. All of these things come back down to green plants. So the final thing that I want to just talk about is the fact that you've really challenged my ideas around, you've mentioned it before, the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And before I came and saw your program, I didn't understand. I kept thinking that you have to have your basic needs met, which are food, water, shelter. But that's not the case for the people that are coming through your program. There are people that don't necessarily have shelter. Yeah, that's the hardest thing. But the most interesting and sort of optimistic thing in the reverse is it's hard to see people that are home coming and finding that sense of community or the place in people, because it's not the kind of what you want to see in the world. But it is nice to hear the perspective sort of well-being statements around it. Everyone
everyone knows when you talk about a holiday or something, prospective sort of happiness and that looking forward is a good thing. And people talk about retiring someday, and it's a good thing. But when we talk about health and social well-being, we talk about now. We don't usually talk about that sort of visioning stage. So even though someone might be without, shelter at a point in time in a garden or a cooking class, talking about, this would be great to have someday, that's a change point, because it actually is a point to aim to, which is sort of that perspective, well-being, happiness, and growth and joy sort of thing. So it's hard to see in the moment, because you don't ever want to see someone without those things, because we take for granted the sort of basic, fundamental human rights sort of based elements, but is a good opportunity for people to actually have something to look forward to then to work towards, and sometimes looking at what matters to a person and where they want their future and vision to be at makes more sense than just trying to put out fires all the time.
Exactly. So to end, I'm going to read a quote from Forbes magazine. The quote begins, "Years ago, the anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked by a student what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in a culture. The student expected Mead to talk about clay pots, tools for hunting, grinding stones, or religious artifacts. But no, Mead said that the first evidence of civilization was a 15,000-year-old fractured femur found in an archaeological site. The femur is the longest bone in the body, linking hip to knee. In societies without the benefits of modern medicine, it takes about 6 weeks of rest for a fractured femur to heal. Mead explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. You cannot run from danger, you cannot drink or hunt for food. Wounded in this way, you are meat for your predators. No creature survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. You are eaten first. A broken femur that has healed is evidence that another person has taken time to stay with the fallen, has bound up the wound, has carried the person to safety, and has tended them through recovery. A healed femur indicates that someone has helped a fellow human rather than abandoning them to save their own life." End of quote. So here, civilization is about humanity, about caring for one another. When we say be more humane, really we're saying be more caring. And I think that this is what you were talking about before, JR, that this has unfortunately been lost.
Yep. But we can get it back. Society and civilization again.
Exactly. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me.